Why is everyone leaving the UK? We'll be talking about this question in today's episode. It's actually quite an interesting thing that's happening, and it's quite serious. I think it has a few implications for the economy of the country as well, because it's projected that 16,500 millionaires will be leaving the UK in 2025. And that's a lot of people, and of course, a lot of wealth and money that's leaving the country. I think there are many millionaires and wealthy people who are moving to the US and moving to places where they have better opportunities, perhaps. But yeah, in today's episode, I want to talk a bit about this topic, about what's going on in the UK and why people might be leaving. Is it getting worse? We'll talk about that. And I also want to talk on a more personal level. This might be a more casual, personal episode about my recent trip back to the UK. It was my first time in my home country in about 1 year, and it was crazy to feel that change after 1 year. So I'll be talking a little bit about that as well and sharing my perspective and my reverse culture shock. So yes, lots to get into in today's episode. This is the Level Up English podcast, the best place to come to level up and improve your English one day at a time. My name is Michael, your host and your teacher for the day. Let's get started. So I think I'm going to come back to the title of this episode at the end in my conclusion, in my summary, but I will just mention quickly that this is a known thing, that emigrating, people leaving the UK, it has increased to some level in recent years. And I think there could be a few reasons for this, including cost of living. Things are getting very expensive there. And I also think there's this feeling of stagnation. Right, here's a good word that we can learn now. It can be used in a few different ways, but to stagnate is basically the word we use when water in a pond doesn't move. There's no flow to the water. It's not like a river or a stream. It's just in that place and it's not moving at all. And then the water gets quite dirty. It might start to develop some, dangerous bacteria, and it would not be the right water to drink. You would get very sick. So that's stagnant water, or water that has stagnated. And you can also use it to describe a process or something that is not progressing, it's not improving, it's staying the same. And, I think in life, if you stay the same, it's not really a good thing. I feel like we have this feeling that it's good to keep improving. And I think especially in terms of countries and the economy, we need to keep moving. You can't just stay the same. And I think people have this idea, this sense that the UK and many Western or European countries are stagnating and the progress is slowing down. And I don't know. I'm not really the person to say whether that's true or not. However, I will share my anecdotal experience. That means experience based off my own stories, not evidence about this problem today. So let's go back to my reason I want to talk about this today, and this is my summer holidays, basically. So as I often like to do in the summer, this year I went back to the UK for about 1 month. It was a nice long trip back home in the UK. It was very, very fun, very enjoyable, quite peaceful in some ways, and just really good to experience some of the things I missed after 1 year of living abroad. And I think there were lots of ups and downs, honestly. Maybe the biggest down was right at the beginning. I had probably the worst flight experience of my life. I don't enjoy flying as it is. Of course, if I could go back in another way, I would, for many reasons, but also it was just horrible. So basically, it's like a 10, 11 hour flight back to the UK. And basically, the entire time there was turbulence, right? Turbulence is that shakiness of the plane. The first 5 or 6 hours, basically until we got over India, it was quite extreme. Well, For me, it was extreme. I know maybe if you're a pilot, you wouldn't say it's extreme, but there was a lot of shaking in the plane, and it really was very scary. I'll just put it that way. It was quite traumatic for me, honestly. And yeah, I couldn't really relax for the entire 11 hours. I was on edge. Right? On edge means you're kind of waiting for some danger. You're nervous. You can't relax if you're on edge. Imagine being on the edge of a cliff. It's a bit like that. So I was on edge for that time, and it was a really horrible experience. So when I did arrive in the UK, I was just so thankful to be on the ground. I was so happy. There were a few difficult things that happened when we arrived, like in the airport, getting the train, and we had a couple days where we didn't really know where to go. There was some, how could we say, some uncertainty. And maybe ordinarily this might have caused me some stress, but I was just so happy to be on the ground and safe that I didn't care. I was so happy. It was an amazing feeling, honestly, despite the traumatic memories I had. But yeah, anyway, that's kind of besides the point. That's just a beginning to the story here. So coming back to the UK, you might, if you're, like I did, if you're visiting the UK as well, you might land in Heathrow Airport in London. It's maybe, I think it's the biggest airport in Europe, one of the biggest in the world, I guess. I need to look up the official statistics, but very big airport. And yeah, I mean, first kind of reverse culture shock that I had was just how broken everything is. Like nothing is working. Even in Thailand, things generally work fine. Vending machines, electronic displays, timetables for buses, all this kind of stuff, it works pretty much fine here. But in the UK, nothing's maintained. It breaks all the time. It's kind of frustrating. My very first impression, I was trying to see the country through the eyes of a foreigner. Maybe one of you guys visiting for the first time. What would be your first impression? And honestly, it wasn't great. The moment I got out of security in the airport, the escalators were broken. I wanted to go to the coach station, but the escalators were broken. What a shame. So I had to walk down many, many stairs. It wasn't clear, very confusing. I got to the coach and I was looking for the bus I needed to take. And the timetable, it's like a computer screen with all the stops on it. So I could kind of see that I had the right coach, but I couldn't really see the stops because there was a screen, there was a pop-up window on the screen that said, "Caution, low disk space. Please delete some files to free up space on your computer." The computer where this stuff was held has low disk space. So it's just such a silly thing. It's all of these screens were covered up by this error on the computer. Another thing that went wrong. And then, of course, we got on the coach and it was very hot. It was summer, quite hot at the time. It was a heat wave and the aircon was broken. It was very hot, sweaty, uncomfortable. And, to some extent, people don't really complain because it's kind of expected that things don't work. I don't exactly know why things are much more likely to be broken in the UK, but it's very frustrating. I do feel like there is a lack of respect for a lot of public things. I don't know, like kids and teenagers in the UK, for example, it's a really common one. You go on a bus or a train, you might have a USB port to charge your phone, but then kids will put chewing gum in it, they'll put rubbish in it, maybe adults, I don't know, I'm just assuming it's kids. And I think that would never be done in many Asian countries, for example. So yeah, things like that. People don't have much respect for these public services and things. So yeah, it's a shame, but that's kind of one thing. And I do feel like generally the entrance, let's say the first impression to a country is very important, right? Especially if you're a visitor. I think it's so important to look at what are people seeing when they come into your country? What are the first impressions? And it really goes a long way in shaping someone's perspective of your country. And I would love to hear your opinion. If you've been to the UK, can you think about the first time you went? What was your first impression? the very first thing you felt. I wouldn't be surprised if it was negative because, again, as I just said, many things were broken. When you first get into the airport, it's not... I mean, it looks like a little bit outdated in some areas. It's not super clean and nice. It's a bit messy and chaotic. Things can be quite dirty too. Like, I often think about that in Paddington, which is one of the main train stations in London. If you're traveling to London from the airport, it's likely that you will end up in Paddington. That will be your first station. And you leave the station, and you're excited to see London for the very first time. And there's rubbish all over the floor. It's dirty. It doesn't look nice. That's often what you might find on the streets outside of Paddington in that area. And yeah, it's not always the nicest impression. Again, I'm not exactly insulting the UK. I'm going to say some nice things about it later as well. You have it in many countries. Many countries it's the same. In Paris, I had a horrible first impression when I went to Paris last year. Very dirty, very dangerous and sketchy kind of feeling. But of course, if you go away from the station area, it gets nicer. But yeah, I think they need to work on that first impression a bit more. Another thing that really shocked me, I was expecting this actually, but it's still always surprising to me. It's just the price of everything. Some things are just so expensive. I know it's kind of boring to talk about. Everyone talks about the price of things, but I do think this might be one reason why a lot of people are thinking about leaving the UK. Is just because why would you spend so much money in the UK on daily necessities when you can do exactly the same in another country, but for much less money? And it ends up being quite a simple decision for many people, right? And yeah, I think that always shocks me going back. It's just how expensive things are getting. And even if I just want to buy something quite simple, like some beans, some lentils, like quite a simple staple food, or even rice, it's kind of crazy how that adds up to a lot of money. If I want to go to the supermarket in Thailand to buy some snacks and a couple things for lunch, I might spend, £1 or £2 on that. In the UK, just one lunch with a few snacks can easily get over £10, just for a couple things like a drink and all this stuff. I think in the airport, no, it wasn't in the airport, it was in the station, I think. Of course, London can be more expensive generally than the rest of the UK. But I think it was in one of it could have been, again, Paddington Station. I went to get a meal deal, which is something I honestly missed about the UK. If you don't know what a meal deal is, basically every supermarket has this deal where if you buy certain things together, it's always the same price. So you can get a drink, a main, and a snack. So it could be anything you want. You could get a water, or you can get a fizzy drink, or maybe even a cold coffee or something like that. And yeah, the snack can be a chocolate bar, fruit, crisps, or something like that. Usually the main is a sandwich, right? So if you put these things together, it will always be the same price. When I was a teenager, it was like £3 maybe. Now it's like 4 or 5. It's going up way too much. But yeah, when I went to get a meal deal, I got a couple things, and it ended up being £10. That's insane. I had a sandwich, I had a drink, and I forget what the snack was, but I had some kind of snack as well. But those 3 things were £10. And to be fair, this wasn't the regular meal deal. This was premium meal deal. So some supermarkets will do this as well, where you can get kind of a nicer thing or a bigger thing, and you have to buy the top price, right? So I think, rather than a sandwich, it might be like a baguette, which is a little bit bigger, right, than a sandwich. So something like that might end up being the premium meal deal. But what I had, it really wasn't that much food. It was one meal that I was going to eat on the train. And yeah, £10 was just insane. So yeah, things like that always shock me. And you really have to watch your money, because if you buy the wrong things, it can add up very quickly. However, here's a couple positive things, because again, I don't like these episodes just to be complaining about the UK, especially because I know a lot of you love the UK. That's maybe why you're learning English. I also love the UK. I really love the country I'm from. I think it's a great place to be. But, I think part of leaving it and part of seeing it with new eyes is also seeing the negatives in it as well. And maybe that's encouraging it to improve, you point out the bad stuff to help it improve, maybe. I don't think it's going to listen to me though. But yeah, anyway, just some positive things that I want to mention. Again, you might call these reverse culture shocks, things that I kind of forgot that were really nice about the UK. One of them is small talk. Not everyone likes this, but I love that kind of small talk you get in the UK. For example, I went on quite a few bike rides in the countryside, and every time I cycled past someone, maybe it was a retired person in their garden, they would always just make a comment to me like, "Ooh, like lovely day for cycling, isn't it?" Or, "Oh, are you doing the Tour de France?" Or, some kind of like joking, silly comment, not very serious, but that's kind of nice. It's just that very, very simple interaction with the people that you see. Of course, this is much more common in the countryside, so there is a little bit of a mismatch here, where I'm coming from a big city in Asia to countryside in the UK. It may not be the same in London, but I think even in London, you can have a bit more small talk. When you go to buy a sandwich, you can just say, "Oh, how's it going? Oh, hot day, well, weather's crazy," or something like that, and they might respond positively or not, but small talk is quite normal in the UK. It's quite nice, I think. And in Thailand, for example, you could say it's because of my poor Thai language skills, but I still get the feeling that small talk is not such a big thing here. If I said to my cashier in the supermarket, "How's your day going? How are you today?" I think that might be a bit strange. If you are from Thailand, you can let me know if I'm wrong, but that's the feeling that I get. But yeah, even regardless of that, just speaking in your own language again and having these little interactions is quite a relief in many ways. You don't have to think so hard about what you're saying. And another good thing is tap water. This is such a rare thing in the world, is having such clean water that comes from the taps in your kitchen sink. I think we're quite lucky in the UK, especially where I'm from in the southwest of England. Generally, the tap water is clean, very good drinking water. No one buys bottled water really in the UK. In most parts anyway, people don't buy bottled water. And I love that. I was quite surprised at first. It felt weird after 1 year of not drinking from a tap, just going back to the tap again. It kind of felt a bit unnatural, but yeah, it was very nice, and I didn't have to waste all my money on bottled water, which is always annoying and not good for the environment either. Another thing which I can talk about, I think I would be silly to avoid this topic, is the weather. The weather. There's a few things. Like, first of all, people often say, I see this all the time online, people saying that heat in the UK is much worse than other countries, like even Spain or Thailand. Basically, 30 degrees in the UK is hotter than 30 degrees in Thailand. Is that true? So I might be causing some controversy, argument, debate with this opinion here, but this is just my opinion. I don't know the science, I'm going to be honest. I don't know the evidence, but everyone says that's true. In my opinion, it's not true. I just don't think it's true. I do think there is something to say about humidity levels. How humid, which means how wet the air is, does make you feel hotter or colder. And of course, there is a difference as well between the temperature and the feel-like temperature. The temperature... Okay, I don't really understand it if I'm being totally honest, but the temperature on your weather app may say 20 degrees, but it really feels like 25 degrees. And, maybe wind is also a factor too. If it's hot but windy, you might feel a bit better than, hot but no wind, of course. But yeah, I just feel like it doesn't quite feel that way to me. So when I went back to the UK, it was a very good comparison because in Thailand, it was rainy season and it was about 30 degrees, which is quite cool, relatively cool. But the UK was also 30 degrees, right? So when I went back to the UK, it was going for a heat wave, which is a bit hotter than normal summer temperatures. And yeah, I was basically going from 30 to 30. and I felt pretty much the same, except for a little bit less humidity. It was a bit drier in the UK. And my theory is I think the reason why a lot of people in the UK say that heat in the UK feels worse than other countries is because when they're in other countries, they're usually more relaxed, right? And if you go to Spain in 30 degrees on holiday, maybe you're sitting by the pool, you're drinking a beer, you're just relaxing, you're not doing anything. Whereas in the UK, in 30 degrees, you're going to work, you're getting on the tube, you're driving your car, you're in these places where you're moving, you're hot, you're uncomfortable, and you're not as relaxed. That's my theory as to why people have this opinion, but let me know if you disagree. I may be totally wrong, but that's just my feeling anyway, that the temperature is actually kind of similar. Oh, and you know another thing, a really small thing that I loved about going back to the UK was the fluffy clouds. I'm sure this is one that people haven't really spoken about before. It's quite a specific one, but this is something that I found quite interesting, that different climates and countries around the world have different cloud formations, right? And, you know, in Thailand and Southeast Asia and in these tropical hot countries, of course there are clouds, but I don't quite know how to describe it, but they're not fluffy. They're not fluffy clouds. And maybe I'll put a picture on the screen here, maybe one of the photos that I took on my summer trip in England. But some of the clouds are so fluffy. They're white, they're beautiful, they kind of float along the sky. It really makes the landscape and the countryside look much more beautiful. So that's something that if I never left the UK, I would certainly take for granted. But there was one day in particular where I lay on a bench in the countryside looking up at the clouds, and it was so relaxing. It was really nice, and I feel like it doesn't quite work in some other climates. So if you do go to the UK and you're traveling from a very different climate, pay attention to the sky. And the last thing, okay, we'll end on a negative thing here in regards to the weather. Rain. I'm not going to talk too long about it. I'm sure you've heard it all before. UK and rain, right? We don't have the most amount of rain in the world. It's definitely not the rainiest country. But one thing that we all hate in the UK is how long the rain lasts. It's very common to have drizzle, which is very light rain, but unlike in Thailand, where the rain might last for 2 hours, very heavy rain in just a couple hours, in the UK, you can have rain for 7 days and it does not stop. And it's not really the fact that you're getting wet, because even with light rain, you're not getting super wet. It's just depressing. Everything is grey, it's damp, it's cold. It's really not a nice thing. I think that there were about 2 periods of rain when I went back that lasted for 3 days or so. Very depressing, but fortunately for the most part, I was very lucky and most of my trip was very sunny. So I can't complain too much. And now here's another thing that I wrote down in my notes. As soon as I came back to London, straight from Bangkok to London, so one big city to another big city. This might come as a surprise to some of you. I know many people don't like Bangkok because they say it's too chaotic. But when I went back to London, I was quite overwhelmed, honestly. I think there were definitely more people on the streets in London. In central London, I found it was busier than central Bangkok, which I found quite strange. I don't know why. Maybe Bangkok is more spread out than London. Maybe, I don't really know. But there were more people, and I suppose one thing that I can say for certain is London is a much more fast-paced city. I think this is a cultural thing, right? People in London walk very fast, and they don't have much patience if you're a slow walker. Bangkok is very different. Even though it's such a huge city, it's very normal to walk slow. And in fact, I have the opposite problem here when I get frustrated with people walking too slowly. If you like walking quickly, you might find it difficult to get around in Bangkok. It's not very nice when you're running late for something. So that's one difference. I did find it quite overwhelming, just the fast-paced nature of the city of London. I also found I forgot how everything works. That was an interesting discovery, I suppose. I kind of very quickly forgot how to pay for things in the UK. In Thailand, you have this system where you use your banking app and you scan with your camera, you scan a QR code, which allows you to pay quite easily on your phone. And, in the UK, the first time I went to buy something, I pulled out my phone and I went to go take a picture, and I thought, wait, why am I taking a picture? There's no QR code. And of course I remembered I think it's actually even easier, right? You just double tap the side of your phone, you scan with Apple Pay or Google Pay or whatever on your phone. See, again, I did it there. I said scan. It's not scan. This is my experience in Thailand that's affecting my speech now. So in Thailand, you call it scanning when you pay for something. But in the UK, it's just a contactless payment. I don't know. I forget if there's a better term for it. But yeah, contactless payment on your phone. You just tap. I think we use the word tap, right? You tap your phone and that's how you pay. But there was kind of an awkward moment. I think I was in Starbucks in the airport, maybe. I don't remember. And I was just like, there was a moment of like, how do I pay again? What do I do? And it was really awkward. I can't really describe it. And I also asked for a soy latte with soya milk instead of cow's milk. And the staff asked me, I tried to say it in the same way that he asked the question. It was like this speed. Soy milk is allergy or preference? And I just kind of paused, like, excuse me? What? What did you say? I had no idea what he said. It was really kind of confusing. So I kind of felt like an English learner in that moment. And what he actually was asking was, is your choice of having the soy milk, is it because of an allergy, like lactose intolerance, or is it just a preference? You prefer soy milk? I suppose they like to know for their survey. I don't know exactly why they are asking. But yeah, that was very confusing. I feel like I'm not used to the way to order things in the UK anymore, and things like that I just found quite overwhelming. It's a little thing, but I found that quite funny. And here's one more small thing before we go to a few bigger things, is a lot of habits of British people I found quite amusing. Right, and these were habits that I had before. There are certain things that we do in any culture, in any country, that are totally normal. And they're usually very small and tiny things that you never even think about unless you go abroad. And once you leave and come back for some time, you start to see these things from an outsider perspective. And these things some of them you might question. Like, you might actually like them even more, or you might find them a bit strange. And one of them in the UK, which I never noticed before, but now I find really weird, is everyone on public transport, well, especially trains, eats crisps. In American English, this is potato chips, these crispy, dried, salty potatoes, right? I don't know how to describe it, but I think you know what I mean. Crisps, we call it in the UK. It's a very common snack food in the UK. I like to avoid it if I can. It's not super healthy, of course, high in salt and fat. But yeah, I don't know why, but the moment you sit down on a train in the UK, there'll be like 10 people all around you opening a bag of crisps, right? And I feel like maybe if even if you've traveled a lot in the UK, it might be that you haven't even noticed this, but I have noticed it because I'm quite sensitive to sound. So it kind of annoys me because I like to just relax on the train and sit back and look at the views out the window. But everywhere around me, there's rustling. We call that rustling of the bags. People chomping and crunching on crisps. It's really loud. It's really annoying for me. And it's kind of funny how, without fail, this will happen on every train you go on. I wish I could think of more examples of this, but that's just one example of a funny little habit that people have. I don't know why, I suppose. At the train station, they always sell crisps. It's just an easy snack to have on the train. And then, yeah, if you go to China, it's totally different. The snacks that they sell are relatively healthy in comparison. One that I find quite strange, but honestly, it's much healthier, is sweet corn. People will just eat sweet corn on the train in China. It's an easy, healthy snack to have, right? And it's something we don't really do, or I think would be quite strange to do in the UK, actually. So again, it's a cultural thing. But okay, I think we'll go to a couple more serious points before we get to the summary. So again, addressing the title, which is why is everyone leaving the UK? Okay, maybe it's a bit of an exaggeration, but why is the number of people leaving the UK increasing? Here's just one idea I have: is the again stagnation, the lack of change. So this is something I noticed first when I went back to the UK, and then again when I went to Thailand after my trip recently. I came back and I noticed it twice. So in my city in the UK, in my home city, about 2 years ago or so, there was a big construction project that started in the city centre. So it's quite a nice area, in my opinion. The entire centre of the city. Here's a quick history lesson. I'm talking about Plymouth, by the way, which is in the southwest of the UK. The city of Plymouth. It was bombed quite heavily in World War II. And after the war, it was kind of a nice chance to redesign the centre of the city. You had to rebuild. Why not build it in a nice way? In some ways it was rushed because some of the buildings are quite ugly. But what I quite like is the entire centre is a pedestrianised zone. Pedestrian means person. So in other words, it's only for people. There's no road. It's just a big area where you can walk and go shopping and relax, go to a cafe. I really like that. I think every city should have that area, that zone, to be honest. But basically 2 years ago, they started a project to redesign and kind of update this city centre. So basically the entire centre of the city, the most important part of the city, is now all covered off with construction fences. Everything is messy. There's dirt everywhere. It's kind of chaotic. It's really ugly at the moment. If they're going to improve the appearance, they're going to renew the area, of course, that's fine. But I was quite excited to come back after 1 year or more and see, okay, has it finished? Has it finally been completed after 1 year? Have they made progress? And I was excited to see. I got off the train, I walked into the centre, and it was almost the same as it was 1 year ago. Holes in the ground, no one is working, it's very chaotic. I think there are some problems with paperwork, bureaucracy, we can call it. It's not so easy to get things done because you need to get permission from certain departments, lots of things slowing down the processes, lack of funding, all this kind of stuff, not enough money. So there are many reasons for it. I'm not going to go into detail about that. But the point is, it didn't really improve much at all in that year. It still looks horrible. And I kind of feel like if you're a tourist visiting the city, it's a terrible impression. It doesn't look nice at all. And conversely, let's contrast that with Thailand. I was away from Thailand for 1 month, basically. And when I came back, there were so many things that were different. I saw new skyscrapers that were almost finished, that weren't there before. New parks were opening. New businesses had closed and opened in that time I had gone. The pace of change in Thailand, in Bangkok, is much, much faster. And of course, you might say it's because these countries are at kind of different levels of their development. UK, you might say, developed a bit earlier than Thailand. Thailand's still developing very quickly now, which is very exciting. But I do think that is a big reason why a lot of people are getting bored of the UK. It's just everything's the same, nothing's changing, there's nothing to do. And I do think that's a complaint that a lot of people might have. I do think it can be quite exciting to live in a place that's always improving, it's always growing. The public transport in Bangkok is always expanding and improving, and it's really exciting to see those positive changes. In London, for example, you can say there's already a lot of good things about the city, of course, but I think there's a lot that could be improved, even like small things, like simple things that could be improved that aren't really being worked on, which is a shame. And I think the final point I will make here, one of the big points, is that the thing of convenience. This is something that you might not realize at how inconvenient your life is until you experience a higher level of convenience. A lot of countries have really got this down well. I think of like Japan and China and Thailand. They really value convenience in many ways. And the UK, I find, can be quite an inconvenient place to live. And what I mean by that are things like shopping, buying groceries and things. It's very limited. You might not have many shops in your area. You might have to travel quite far to go to a shop, even if you live in a bigger city. I find that can be annoying. The opening times are ridiculous. Just my opinion. I don't want to sound too negative again, but I wanted some food, and it's still bright. The sun sets at 10 p.m. in the summer, so still lots of daylight left. It's 4 p.m. right now. Let's get some food. I'm going to go to the supermarket, get some food for dinner. Wait, it's Sunday. The supermarket's already closed at 4 p.m. It's insane to me. So I basically had no good food for dinner that night. Of course, I should have been prepared, but I kind of got used to not being prepared. In Thailand, it's much easier to be spontaneous, which means doing things without planning. If I don't have any food in the cupboards, I can very easily order something on my phone, whether that's groceries or food in a restaurant. I could go to the shop. There's a shop on every street, a little convenience store. I think that kind of stuff is great. Another thing is washing. This is another climate comment, but I've got very lazy with my washing. I don't really have a routine as to when I wash my clothes. I basically just do it whenever I need to. And basically my clothes will be dry. If I hang them outside on the balcony, they might be dry in 4 hours, right? So I can do my washing in the morning and wear those clothes when I go out in the afternoon. It's very convenient. But in the UK, you really have to plan in advance. If you don't have any clothes that are clean, it might take even 24 hours to dry your clothes if you hang them outside. Depends on the weather, of course, but yeah, that was very annoying. There were many times where I didn't really have any clean clothes because of my lack of planning. So that was a bit of a culture shock again. And I think one of my big culture, this is another topic now, but I just came back from a trip to China, and a lot of the things there that really surprised me was how convenient things are. Little things like if you're on a train, you can order takeaway on the train, so the driver will meet you at the next station and give it to you on the door of the train. To me, that is insane. That's kind of unbelievable. That would never happen in the UK. Another thing, maybe I'll put a video on the screen for the video viewers now. I stayed in a hotel and I ordered a takeaway on my phone, and I got a call from the lobby, the desk, and they said, "Your food is with the robot." And I was like, "What does that mean? My food is with the robot? What do you mean?" And then I opened the door, and there was a robot coming down the hallway, and it turned around at my door, opened up, and my food was inside. There was no people there, and then it went back down the hallway. The lift opened on its own, and it went back down to the first floor. Unbelievable. I think if it was in the UK, it would get vandalized or broken very quickly, unfortunately. So things like that are really cool. Lots of conveniences. I find that the UK is not super prioritizing. That's a shame. But okay, I will end on a positive note now, because again, I don't want to sound like that grumpy old man that's hating on his own country. I do want to say I love the UK. We criticize what we love. It's part of life, isn't it? And if you see something as your own, you feel like you have the right to criticize it more. I would never say these bad things about another country in quite the same way, because it's not mine, right? The UK is my country, so I feel like it's a little bit better for me to say, to point out the flaws, which means the imperfections, right? But yeah, overall, I love the UK. If I had to live there for my whole life, I would be happy. Despite some of the problems, I do think it's a great place to live. The people are warm and welcoming. The landscape is beautiful. There's a lot to do. I love it. So I want to end on that point. I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. I did do a lot of cycling on my trip there as well, and I loved it so much. Coming from Bangkok back to the UK countryside, it just felt so free, so safe, so open. I love that feeling of freedom, cycling wherever you want to go, stopping where you want, sitting in a field and watching the day go by. These things I love about the UK, or finding a cafe in the middle of the countryside pretty much and stopping for a drink. Yeah, really good experiences there. So definitely will not stop going back to the UK. Maybe I will also live there again one day. We'll see what the future holds. Who knows? But yeah, just wanted to make that point clear. So yeah, I think I've covered some good and bad points, but overall, I think I've covered some possible reasons, in my own experience and opinion, why more and more people are deciding to leave the UK. I suppose a few call to action points here, which means asking you to respond. First of all, let me know the perception of your own country. Especially if you're in Europe, maybe. Is it the same where you live? Do you feel like a lot of people are thinking about leaving your country for similar reasons? And yeah, maybe you can just let me know if you think I've missed anything when it comes to the stagnation of England or other countries. Do you think there's something I missed? Is there another reason why people might be leaving to go somewhere else? I don't know. It could be a few things, but again, I'm just kind of talking. I'm sharing my views. I'm not giving you any scientific evidence or any studies, really, anything like that. So hopefully you can just see this as an enjoyable thing to listen to and also some good English listening practice. But okay, I think I'll end my rant there for today, and I will go to some reviews from Apple Podcasts. We're going around the world today because we have one from Turkey, and I'll read this one now. This one says, I've never been much of a podcast listener, but since relocating to the UK, I was keen to get into both the language and culture. The Level Up English podcast is brilliant for that, and having the transcription available is a perfect bonus. Great work, Michael. Cheers for this. Well, thank you so much. This is from ADL4M, that user. So thank you so much. I'm glad that you're finding the transcription useful. I guess you mean on the members website. And yeah, that's kind of exciting that you're in the UK. And if you want to reach out to me, let me know by email what your experience is. I've spoken a lot about the UK today. Maybe you can let me know what you feel like. Do you agree with anything I've said? Or maybe you see a lot of positives compared to Turkey, or negatives. I don't know. Let me know your experience of how it compares to your home country. If you do get back in touch, maybe I'll read it out on a future episode as well, if you don't mind. Yeah, thank you very much. Going around the world to South Africa now, we have Fort Lino. Just wanted to give my thanks, man. Your content has been and still is very helpful. I practice shadowing for my accent with your content, and it's very much followable. So thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad you can shadow and work on your accent as well. That's great to hear. So keep it up, and thanks for the review. And one from Italy now, from Alessio. And they said, "Hi Michael, thanks for your podcast. I love it. Your voice is very pleasant to listen to. I could listen to you for hours." Oh, so nice. Well, I don't know how long I've been recording today, but probably you will have done that by the end of this episode, because I've been talking for quite a while. But thank you very much for your review. All of those really nice. It does help the podcast a lot, so I appreciate them. By the way, if any of you are wondering, I mentioned this last week, but I did recently have an operation on my eye, which is why it looks like I've been punched in the face. As I said last week, I want to do more of my personal updates and work updates at the end of the episodes to keep it, to keep the beginnings a bit more interesting. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that here. But besides that, I don't really have an update today. Just keep it there. So maybe we can go right into the quote, which is from Marcel Proust. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Well, okay, this is quite a deep one here. So let me try to think about how I can say this in a different way. I think what Marcel is saying is the discovering new things, that kind of adventure of discovering new things, it's not really about seeing new things, seeing new places. It's about having a new perspective. So it's not about what you see, it's about how you see things. It's about changing in yourself. So this is kind of related to what I've been talking about today, isn't it? Where we're not talking about just traveling and seeing pretty places. We're talking about how the act of traveling changes you as a person and changes your perspective and your opinions and even your character. So yeah, my perspective on my home country has changed quite a lot. Some good, some bad. So quite interesting there. But yeah, great quote there. I love that reminder as well. But okay, I think we'll finish here. So thank you so much for listening to episode 340. And I will see you in the next one next week. Bye for now.